Statement. On the reception of clergy of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia. By the Moscow Patriarchate Archdiocese of Orthodox Churches of Russian tradition in Western Europe. 1 On August 23, 2021, a group of 13 Russian Orthodox clergy in the United Kingdom, for the clergy, moved from the Rocker Diocese of Western Europe. For the Rocker Diocese, to the Moscow Patriarchate Archdiocese of Orthodox Churches of Russian tradition in Western Europe, for the MP Archdiocese. This transfer was formally announced by the MP Archdiocese in its communique of September 3, 2021. Suite à leur demande instantiante et répétée inzitue leur petition, par économie canonique pour ils puissent vivre en plénitude la grâce de l'Église orthodoxe, les 21 et 23 août dernier ont enriquis au senda. L'archevêque de Églises orthodoxes de tradition russe en Europe occidentale les communautés et les clercs du Royaume-Uni ci dessus mentionnées. Wherever follow the names of the major clergy transferring from Rocker to the MP Archdiocese. This transfer was motivated by two principal factors. Firstly, the clergy sought to escape the situation of schism into which they had been placed by the ruling bishop of the Rocker Diocese, BP Irene I. Steenberg. Secondly, the clergy could not reconcile themselves either with the BP Irene I's attack upon Russian Orthodox tradition, or with anti-canonical actions of BP Irene I, actions which greatly exceed the limits of his own canonical jurisdiction within the Church. 3. The clergy had hoped that their transfer would occur quietly and without controversy. Unfortunately, due to subsequent actions of BP Irene I. Steenberg and a small number of clergy within the Rocker Diocese, this has not been possible. Various misrepresentations of this transfer have been circulated, online and in correspondence, most significantly the false assertion that this transfer did not take place in a canonical manner. Subsequent to their transfer, BP Irene I himself, in violation of both the holy canons of the Orthodox Church and Rocker's own procedures, issued several of the clergy with notices of suspension and summons to appear before his diocesan court. To date, these recriminatory actions are ongoing. For in consequence, it has become necessary to prepare the following statement. This statement will have 4 components. 1. It will present the reasons for the transfer of the clergy from the Rocker Diocese to the MP Archdiocese in August 2021. 2. It will correct the erroneous claim that the transfer of the clergy did not take place in a canonical manner. 3. It will highlight violations of the holy canons, Rocker's own procedures, and natural justice by BP Irene I. Steenberg and his diocesan court in BP Irene I's recriminatory actions against the clergy. 4. It will attempt to outline what is required to end the current schism into which the Rocker Diocese has been placed by BP Irene I, and what is needed for a constructive path forward. The reasons for the transfer. 5. The transfer of clergy from the Rocker Diocese to the MP Archdiocese was prompted by 3 issues, the breach of Rocker's sacramental communion and canonical unity with the MP Archdiocese in the United Kingdom in January 2021, 2. The non-canonical action of the Rocker Bishop of Western Europe in publicly judging clergy out with his jurisdiction in February 2021, and 3. The statement of intention to cease Rocker's sacramental communion with the Diocese of Sauraz, in April 2021. The schism of Rocker from the MP Archdiocese in the United Kingdom. 6 On December 17, 2020, Metr John of Dubna, the ruling metropolitan of the MP Archdiocese, received the Greek Catholic priest, Fr. Jacob Siemens into the ranks of its clergy at the Cathedral of Saint Alexander Nevsky in Paris. In receiving Fr. Jacob, Metr John did not perform a reordination, but rather received Fr. Jacob by vesting and Concelebration. 7. Upon learning of this event, the ruling bishop of the Rocker Diocese, BP Irenei Steenberg, rejected the reception of Fr. Jacob Siemens by vesting and concelebration. In his Directive 359/E, dated January 23, 2021, BP Irenei stated that it is absolutely impossible for a Catholic priest to be received into the Orthodox Church as a priest by vesting and concelebration. The reception on 4th/December 17, 2020 by the Archdiocese of an heterodox individual by the name of James Sick Siemens, resident in the environs of Cardiff, Wales, purportedly into the ranks of the Holy Orthodox clergy, but in a manner that appears to us to be in violation of the Holy Orthodox canons as well as the firm practices of the Russian Orthodox Church as a whole, namely, that this individual, who was a Ukrainian Catholic Uniat priest, was received into Orthodoxy apart from the sacramental measures of baptism or chrismation, and further, was thereafter acknowledged as an Orthodox priest, without having an Orthodox ordination. While the former situation, reception into Orthodoxy by confession, is canonically highly irregular, but not an entirely unprecedented misapplication by ECONOMIA of the canonical measures meant to apply to one who has an Orthodox baptism/chrismation and returns from schism, in this case, improperly applying it to a man who never had either, the latter issue, or recognizing a heterodox ordination as if it constituted the establishment of a man as an Orthodox priest, is wholly uncanonical and goes against the most basic foundations of the Holy Orthodox Church, to whose true nature we are called to be obedient and, when it is challenged, to defend, for the sake of the faithful. 8. In the same Directive 359/E, of January 23, 2021, BP Irenei Steenberg responded to the MP Archdiocese's reception of Fr. Jacob Siemens by formally directing his clergy, in boldface, as follows: You may neither concelebrate nor participate liturgically, or in any ecclesiastical measure, with the aforementioned James Siemens, nor with any clergy or local institutions of the Archdiocese/Exarchate in the British Isles. Further, if you have any spiritual children or parishioners who at times have attended Exarchate parishes in the UK for reasons of proximity, etc., you must inform them that, until this matter is resolved, they may not receive the sacraments at any parish of the Exarchate in the British Isles. Superscript 1. 1 NB in Directive 359/E and elsewhere, BP Irenei conflates the terms Archdiocese and 9. With this directive, BP Irenei Steenberg ruptured the unity of the Russian Orthodox Church in the British Isles. On the one hand, since there can be no sacramental communion without concelebration and liturgical participation, BP Irenei's directive to forbid the concelebration and liturgical participation of Rocker with the MP Archdiocese in the British Isles amounted ipso facto to a rupture of Rocker's sacramental communion with the MP Archdiocese in the British Isles. On the other hand, since canonical unity is realized precisely through reciprocal ecclesiastical measures, there can be no canonical unity between two dioceses or churches without both participating in such common ecclesiastical measures. As such, BP Irenei's directive to forbid all Rocker participation in any ecclesiastical measure with the MP Archdiocese amount ipso facto to a rupture of Rocker's canonical unity with the MP Archdiocese in the British Isles. And since a rupture of sacramental communion and canonical unity is a schism, BP Irenei's directive to effect a rupture of Rocker's sacramental communion and canonical unity with the MP Archdiocese in the UK amounted to the initiation of a schism of Rocker from the MP Archdiocese in the British Isles. 10. BP Irenei Steenberg's decision to initiate a schism with the MP Archdiocese on this basis could not be accepted by the clergy. 10.1. Principally, as Russian Orthodox Christians, the clergy could not accept BP Irony I. Steenberg's absolute dogmatic denial of the reception of Catholic priests into the Russian Orthodox Church by vesting and concelebration. For the reception of Catholic priests in this manner is entirely standard practice in the Russian Orthodox Church. Indicatively, the MP Archdiocese receives Catholic clergy by vesting and concelebration, as witnessed for example by the reception of Fr. Jacob Siemens by Metr John of Dubna. The Moscow Patriarchate receives Catholic clergy by vesting and concelebration, as was the case for example with the reception of HMK Gabriel Bungi by Metr Hilarion Alfiev, of Volokolamsk. Hierarchs of the Russian emigration, such as Saint Tikhon of Moscow, Metr Evlogy, Georgievsky, and ABP Georges, Wagner, all consistently received Catholic priests by vesting and concelebration. It was through vesting and concelebration that Saint Alexis, Toth, of Wilkes-Barre, and the many Catholic priests who followed him, were received from Catholicism into the Russian Orthodox Church. By absolutely rejecting the reception of Catholic priests into the Orthodox Church by vesting and concelebration, BP Irony I was in fact rejecting Russian Orthodox practice and the witness of canonized Russian Orthodox saints. As Russian Orthodox Christians, the clergy could not accept such a rejection of the practice and witness of canonized saints of the Russian Orthodox Church. 10.2. Despite BP Irony I. Steenberg's assertions of loyalty to the firm practices of the Russian Orthodox Church as a whole, his schism was in fact based, not upon fidelity to Russian Orthodoxy, but rather on a rejection of the traditions and saints of the Russian Orthodox Church. And, as Russian Orthodox Christians, it was not possible for the clergy to follow BP Irony I into a schism based upon a rejection of Russian Orthodox tradition and the witness of canonized Russian Orthodox saints. Exarchate, in a manner liable to mislead. To be clear, in the quoted passage, BP Irony I is speaking solely about the MP Archdiocese, which is not an exarchate, and not about the Patriarchal Exarchate. In Western Europe, which is in reality a different ecclesiastical body from the MP Archdiocese. 2. The public summary judgment by BP Irony I of clergy beyond his jurisdiction. 11a For having initiated a schism with the MP Archdiocese in the British Isles, BP Irony I Steenberg proceeded to issue his Notice 390/E, dated February 26, 2021, a notice which was, by his instruction, publicly read from the Amvon of the Rocker parish in Cardiff. In December of last year, the Archdiocese, based in Paris, supposedly received a Dr. James VI Siemens into Holy Orthodoxy, though without baptism or chrismation, and now promotes him as a priest. Though this individual has no Orthodox ordination, in direct violation of the holy canons of the Church. Dr. Siemens is, according to the holy canons of the Orthodox Church, not a priest but a layman, and therefore has not received the grace of ordination to perform any rite or sacrament of the Orthodox Church. A baptism performed by a non-priest is not a baptism, confession performed by a non-priest is not sacramental confession, the liturgy celebrated by a non-priest is not the divine liturgy, and those who approach a chalice offered therein do not receive Christ's precious body or blood, whatever may be said by the individual offering it or those in authority over him. This is but spiritual deception, and risks leading the unwitting faithful into the trap of false sacraments and false faith. 12 With this notice, BP Irony I Steenberg formally and publicly passed summary judgment upon Fr. Jacob Siemens, not merely raising a question about Fr. Jacob's ordination, but categorically stating that Fr. Jacob was not ordained, that he was not an Orthodox priest, and that he was, rather, a non-priest. Moreover, with this notice, BP Irony I passed a thinly veiled summary judgment upon Metr John of Dubna, stating that a bishop who recognized Fr. Jacob as an Orthodox priest was in fact guilty of spiritual deception. 13. However, these actions of BP Ironii could not be accepted by the clergy. 13.1. The clergy could not accept the judgment of Fr. Jacob Siemens as a non-priest. For reasons following from those stated above, paragraph 10.1. Just as Fr. Jacob was a Catholic priest received into the Orthodox priesthood through vesting and concelebration, so too, to take one example of many, was Saint Alexis of Wilkes-Barre a Catholic priest received into the Orthodox priesthood through vesting and concelebration. By the logic of BP Ironii Steenberg's judgment, were it the case that, owing to his manner of reception, Fr. Jacob was not a priest but a non-priest exercising a sacramentally fictitious ministry, then so too would Saint Alexis of Wilkes-Barre have been a non-priest who spent the entirety of the Orthodox clerical service, a service for which the Russian Orthodox Church recognizes him as a saint, exercising a sacramentally fictitious ministry. Such a position, however, is unacceptable, as it is a direct rejection of the authenticity of the ministry of a canonized Russian Orthodox saint. As Russian Orthodox Christians, the clergy could not accept any judgment entailing such a consequence, and as such they could not accept the content of BP Ironii judgment of Fr. Jacob Siemens. 13.2. Nor could the clergy accept BP Ironii Steenberg's judgment, however explicitly or implicitly stated, that hierarchs of the Russian Orthodox Church, such as Mtr. John of Dubna, are guilty of spiritual deception when they recognize the priesthood of Russian Orthodox priests received from Catholicism by vesting and concelebration. 4. Were Mtr. John of Dubna guilty on this basis of spiritual deception, then so too, in light of paragraph 10.1, above, would Saint Tikhon of Moscow, Mtr. Evlogy Georgievsky, ABP Georges, Wagner, Mtr. Hilarion of Volokolamsk, and many other Russian Orthodox hierarchs be guilty of spiritual deception, since they too recognize as Orthodox priests those priests who were received from Catholicism by vesting and concelebration. But such a judgment, which judges even canonized Russian Orthodox saints to be guilty of spiritual deception, is not only incompatible with Russian Orthodox tradition, but is a direct attack upon Russian Orthodox tradition. As Russian Orthodox Christians, the clergy could not accept any judgment entailing such a consequence, and as such they could not accept the content of BP Ironii Steenberg's judgment of Mtr. John of Dubna as guilty of spiritual deception. 13.3. Moreover, just as the clergy could not accept the content of BP Ironii Steenberg's public judgments regarding Fr. Jacob Siemens and Mtr. John of Dubna, neither could they accept the fact that BP Ironii had issued such public judgments at all. For, as attested by, indicatively, Canon 14 of the Proto-Deuteros Synod, Canon 2 of the Second Ecumenical Synod, and Canon 13 of the Synod of Antioch, it is a general principle of canonical order in the Orthodox Church that each hierarch respect the limits of his own jurisdiction. Each bishop needs to know his own due limits. Superscript 1. Bishops are not to go beyond their jurisdiction to churches lying beyond the limits of that jurisdiction, so that there be no confusion of the churches. Superscript 2. Let no bishop dare to go from one eparchy to another, unless, having been called upon to do so, he arrive with letters from the metropolitan and from the bishops into whose territory he goes. If, without being called by anyone, a bishop depart in an irregular manner to impose himself on ecclesiastical matters which are not for him to be concerned with, then the things done by him shall be void, and, for his irregularity, he shall be subject to punishment for his unreasonable undertaking, being immediately deposed by the Holy Synod. Superscript 3. However, Neither Fr. Jacob Siemens nor Metr John of Dubna are clergy under BP. Irony I Steenberg's jurisdiction. Indeed, not only are neither clergy within BP Irony I's own Rocker diocese, but neither are clergy within Rocker at all. And as such, BP Irony I had no canonical jurisdiction to pass public summary judgment on either. Rather, any concerns which BP Irony I had about either Fr. Jacob Siemens or Metr John of Dubna ought to have been referred by him to the appropriate body which does possess the canonical jurisdiction to judge the matter of concern. In the case of Fr. Jacob, this would mean referring the concern to Fr. Jacob's diocesan bishop, whilst in the case of Metr John, it would mean referring the concern to the Archiepiscopal Synod of the Moscow Patriarchate. Then, in each case, having referred the matter, BP Irony I should have left it with the body in question to investigate and pass judgment, or indeed, to decide whether or not to pass judgment at all. However, by failing to follow the canonical path, but instead choosing to pass summary judgment upon Fr. Jacob and Metr John, BP Irony I acted ultra vires, assuming for himself the jurisdiction that belongs, in the one case, to the Metropolitan of the Moscow Patriarchate, and, in the other case, to the Archiepiscopal Synod of the Moscow Patriarchate. And, as Russian Orthodox Christians, faithful to the canonical structure of the Russian Orthodox Church, the clergy could not accept such anti-canonical action on the part of BP Irony I, action whose anti-canonical nature is of such gravity that Canon 13 of the Synod of Antioch, quoted above, requires punishment with deposition. 3. The intention to cease Rocker's communion with the Diocese of Sauros. 14. Following the above events, on April 25, 2021, BP Irony I Steenberg stated verbally to Archpriest Andrew Phillips that he intended to sever the sacramental communion of the Rocker Diocese with the Diocese of Sauros, the UK Diocese of the Moscow Patriarchate's Patriarchal Exarchate in Western Europe, should the latter not follow BP Irony I in severing sacramental communion with the MP Archdiocese in the United Kingdom. With this statement, BP Irony I made it clear that he was both willing and actively planning to extend the schism of the Rocker Diocese, beyond simply a schism with the MP Archdiocese in the United Kingdom, to a schism with the entirety of the Moscow Patriarchate in the British Isles. 15. The clergy understood that the Diocese of Sauros would not accept BP Irony I Steenberg's rejection of the standard Russian Orthodox practice of receiving Catholic priests by vesting and concelebration, and that as such the Diocese of Sauros would not follow BP Irony I into a schism with the MP Archdiocese on that basis. And the clergy could not accept BP Irony I's plan of extending the schism of the Rocker Diocese to a schism with the entirety of the Moscow Patriarchate in the British Isles. The clergy were, and are, committed to the unity of the Russian Orthodox Church, both to the 2007 Act of Canonical Communion between Rocker and the Moscow Patriarchate, as well as to the 2019 Patriarchal Gramota uniting the MP Archdiocese to the Moscow Patriarchate. As such, within the context of the British Isles, the clergy could not follow a plan which would push them further into a situation of involuntary division from the rest of the Russian Orthodox Church, and especially not one based upon a position which was itself a rejection of Russian Orthodox tradition and sanctity. 4. The decision to transfer to the MP Archdiocese. 16. The clergy attempted to bring the situation of the Rocker Diocese in the British Isles to the attention of the Rocker Synod in New York. However, this attempt was unsuccessful, and the clergy came to understand that the schism of the Rocker Diocese in the British Isles was not going to be resolved by the Synod. 17. In this extremely difficult situation, the clergy recognized that there existed no Canon stipulating precisely and explicitly what action clergy ought to take in the circumstance where, belonging to one of three territorially overlapping jurisdictions of the one patriarchate, they were being pushed into a situation of schism from the other. Two overlapping jurisdictions, for reasons which were themselves a rejection of the practices and tradition of sanctity of that same patriarchate. Here, the clergy looked to the general principle underlying Canon 14 of the Synod of Sardica, which, in a related context, directs clergy whose communion with their church is being jeopardized by their diocesan bishop, but who find themselves in a situation in which they lack access to their own metropolitan, to proceed instead by approaching the metropolitan of a nearby eparchy. The presbyter or deacon is to have the power to flee for refuge. Kappa alpha tau alpha phi upsilon gamma epsilon nu to the metropolitan of his eparchy, or, if the metropolitan be absent, he is to have the power to run kappa alpha tau rho chi epsilon iota nu to the metropolitan of a neighboring eparchy, superscript 1. Here, the clergy were aware that, belonging to a European rocker tradition whose particular founding context was that of the Russian emigration in Western Europe, they had a particular affinity with the MP Archdiocese, whose émigré history and traditions substantially overlapped with their own. As such, after much deliberation, the clergy took the decision to turn to Metr John of Dubna, the ruling metropolitan of the MP Archdiocese, seeking refuge from the schism of the rocker diocese through a transfer of jurisdiction to the MP Archdiocese. 18 Had BP Irene I Steenberg not instituted a schism based upon reasons which were deeply opposed to Russian Orthodox tradition, had BP Irene I not acted ultra vires in a manner which disregarded the canonical order of the Church, and had BP Irene I not forced them into a position of effectively sectarian isolation from the rest of the Russian Orthodox Church in the United Kingdom, these clerics would not have sought a transfer of jurisdiction. Rather, their decision to transfer was a decision made out of the need to escape from the schismatic position in which they had been placed by the ruling bishop of the rocker diocese, and to return to sacramental communion and canonical unity with the fullness of the Moscow Patriarchate. 2. Refutation of false claims about the transfer of clergy to the MP Archdiocese. 19 In line with his Directive 359/E of January 23, 2021, in which he terminated rockers' participation in all ecclesiastical measures with the MP Archdiocese, BP Irene I Steenberg chose not to follow the standard ecclesiastical practice of issuing letters of the release for the transferring clergy. Instead, he claimed that, because he was choosing not to issue such letters of release, the clergy either could not be received canonically, or could not be received at all, by the MP Archdiocese, and that therefore they remained under his sole canonical jurisdiction. For example, in his Decree 24E/2021 of August 26, 2021, sent to several of the clergy who had transferred, BP Irene I stated, claims that you now belong to the jurisdiction of another bishop or diocese are canonically impossible and groundless, and you are hereby reminded that you remain under the sole canonical authority of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia. Similarly, in his internet communication of September 2, 2021, published on the Rocker Diocese's website, BP Irene I wrote, despite whatever claims may be made either by these individuals or by any cleric from any other jurisdiction, including the Paris Archdiocese's representatives in the UK or elsewhere, these clerics have not been released by the Church abroad and therefore have not been, and cannot be, canonically received by anyone else, and similarly, no parish has been released to the Paris Archdiocese, nor has any been canonically received by them, whatever claims may be erroneously made. The clergyman and parish involved remain under the sole canonical jurisdiction of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia. and in a letter of October 12, 2021, sent to Metr John of Dubna from the Rocker Synod of Bishops, but apparently written by BP Ironii, it was asserted that, regarding the situation of our clergymen in the United Kingdom, Your Eminence was directly told in writing, that they were not released and therefore could not be received by you. We therefore request that the Archdiocese formally clarifies the reality. Namely, that the clergymen supposedly received from our European diocese and our Western Rite Vicariate could not, in fact, be received, since they were not released, and rightly acknowledge the fact that they remain under the sole canonical authority of the Church abroad. These texts make three related, but distinct, assertions, that in principle clergy cannot be received by another diocese or church without letters of release, 2, that the clergy have not in fact been received by the MP Archdiocese, and 3, that the clergy have not been canonically received by the MP Archdiocese. Each of these claims is false. The possibility of jurisdictional transfer without letters of release. 20. It is untrue that in principle clergy cannot be received by another diocese or church without letters of release. 21. Certainly, it must be recognized that there are canons which state that a bishop may only receive a cleric who has a letter of dismissal from his previous bishop. 4. Example, Quinisext Canon 17 states that no cleric, regardless of the rank he happens to have, has permission, without a written dismissal from his own bishop, to be enrolled in a different church, superscript 1. However, it must also be recognized that a canon is neither a dogma nor a universal law, absolutely binding on every concrete case. Rather, as BP Ironii Steenberg himself has affirmed, the canons are not so much a code of canon law that sets out legal parameters for action, but guidelines setting the standard for healthy church life, superscript 2. That is to say, as guidelines, the canons are not necessarily applied with exactitude. Kappa alpha tau kappa rho beta epsilon iota alpha nu, in every situation. Rather, in certain circumstances, particular canons are, by the principle of economy, kappa alpha tau omicron nu omicron mu alpha nu, either only partially applied or not applied at all. This holds for the canons which require clergy be received with letters of release, just as it holds for other canons. 22. This principle of economy is not only recognized generally by Rocker, e.g. in Article 2 of the Addendum to the Act of Canonical Communion, but is also recognized to apply to the specific canons relating to letters of release. For example, between 28 October 2018 and January 25, 2019, BP Ironii Steenberg received the clerics Archpriest Georges Blatinsky, Priest Oleg Turkin, and Priest Denis Baykov from the Russian parishes in Florence and San Remo, into the Rocker Diocese of Western Europe, without requiring or receiving letters of release from their previous bishop. In the letter of 12 October, sent from the Rocker Synod to Metr John of Dubna, it is explained that in such cases letters of release are not required by Rocker, as the diocese or church from which the clergy in question are being received is not one with which Rocker is in a state of canonical unity. The parishes in Florence and San Remo were directly under the omophore of the hierarchy of Constantinople, whose current canonical status was not and is not recognized by the Russian Orthodox Church. When the parishes in question approached our church abroad to be rescued from their non-canonical status under Constantinople, our synod agreed to rescue them from their non-canonical status in early 2019. In accordance with the canonical norms of receiving parishes from non-canonical environments. They were clergymen under Constantinople, whose non-canonical status meant that letters of canonical Release could not be sought from their local hierarchy. As such, by Rocker's own understanding of the canonical order of the Church, the canons prohibiting the reception of a cleric without a letter of release from his previous bishop do not apply in every circumstance. Precisely, for Rocker itself, these canons do not apply in a situation where there is an absence of canonical unity between the diocese or church from which the cleric in question is departing and the diocese or church into which that cleric is being received. In such situations, Rocker holds that such clergy are to be received, kappa alpha tau omicron kappa omicron mu alpha nu, without the reception of a letter of release. 23 Moreover, nowhere do the constitutional documents of the MP Archdiocese state that the Archdiocese cannot receive a cleric kappa alpha tau omicron mu alpha nu, without a letter of release from the bishop of that cleric's previous diocese. Rather, Article 4 of the Archdiocese's statutes specifies that any association requesting to join the Archdiocese is to be accept or rejected finally by the decision of the Archbishop, without reference to letters of release. Accordingly, the MP Archdiocese, by its own constitution, is entitled to receive a parish, which includes clergy and laity, without letters of release from a previous bishop. 24 Indeed, there is no constitutional possibility for imposing upon the MP Archdiocese an interpretation of the canons which, in opposition to Article 4 of the Archdiocese's statutes, insists that letters of release must be required, without exception, in every concrete case of the reception of an association from another diocese or church. Specifically, Article 3 of the Patriarchal Gramota to the MP Archdiocese mandates that the Archdiocese is to be administrated according to its own statutes. And Article 1 of the Archdiocese's statutes states that the Archdiocese's statutes themselves indicate how the holy canons of the Church are to be applied within the MP Archdiocese. As such, Article 4 of the Archdiocese's statutes, which specifies that any association's request to join the Archdiocese is to be accepted or rejected finally at the decision of the Archbishop, without reference to letters of release, itself guides how relevant canons are to be understood within the Archdiocese. Therefore, any attempt to impose upon the MP Archdiocese an interpretation of the canons in conflict with Article 4 of the Archdiocese's statutes would itself be a violation of both Article 1 of the MP Archdiocese's statutes and of Article 3 of the Patriarchal Gramota to the MP Archdiocese. 25 Consequently, not only the nature of the holy canons as canons, but also the practical actions and statements of Rocker, which align with the constitution of the MP Archdiocese itself, show that there is no truth in BP Irene I. Steenberg's claim that, in principle, a transfer for clergy from one diocese or church to another is impossible without letters of release. 2. The reality of the transfer from the Rocker diocese to the MP Archdiocese. 26. It is untrue that the clergy who transferred to the MP Archdiocese have not in fact been received by the MP Archdiocese. 27. Most basically, the claim that the clergy have not in fact been received by the MP Archdiocese is contradicted by the most basic fact of this case, namely that, as Form Ally announced in the MP Archdiocese's communiqué of September 3, 2021, the MP Archdiocese did in fact receive the clergy, on August 23, 2021, see paragraph 1, above. 28. Moreover, BP Irene I. Steenberg has himself recognized the reality of the transfer of clergy to the MP Archdiocese. Thus, in several, unfortunately undated, letters which, via his diocesan chancellery, he sent to the clergy, accusing them of canonical crimes and summoning them to his ecclesiastical court, BP Irene I accused each cleric, in identically worded statements, as follows. Charge, seeking incardination into the jurisdiction of another. bishop without canonical release. Namely, that name has sought to be incardinated into the jurisdiction of another bishop without seeking or obtaining canonical release from his own bishop, moreover, that he, not having obtained said release, nevertheless went under the jurisdiction of another bishop and, in so doing, fled the canonical authority of his own church and its hierarchy. Despite whatever else may be said about this charge, BP Ironii's statement that the clerics nevertheless went under the jurisdiction of another bishop is a recognition that de facto the transfer of clergy from Rocker to the MP Archdiocese has occurred. Even a recognition of the transfer made malgré lui, in accordance with the principle qui non fieri debent, facta valent, is nonetheless a recognition of the reality of the transfer. 29. Consequently, there is no legitimacy in BP Ironii Steenberg's claim that the transfer of clergy has not in fact occurred. Not only does this claim deny the most basic facts of the case, but it is contradicted by BP Ironii's own recognition, in multiple formal documents, of the reality of this transfer. 3. The canonical nature of the transfer from Rocker to the MP Archdiocese. 30. It is untrue that the clergy who transferred to the MP Archdiocese have not been canonically received by the MP Archdiocese. In particular, BP Ironii Steenberg's choice to act in line with his Directive 359/E of January 23, 2021, and not follow the standard ecclesiastical practice of issuing letters of the release for the transferring clergy, does not in the circumstances hinder, in any way, the canonical nature of the transfer of the clergy from the Rocker diocese to the MP Archdiocese. 31. Most basically, the issuing of letters of release is a normal administrative procedure between canonically united dioceses and churches. In a normal canonical situation, letters of release would be withheld only if there were some significant disciplinary issue, e.g. a suspension or defrocking. However, in the case of the clergy transferring from Rocker to the MP Archdiocese, there were no such disciplinary issues, and hence no such reason to withhold letters of release. Nor has BP Ironii Steenberg contended otherwise. 32. Beyond this, the issuing of letters of release, precisely as a normal administrative procedure between canonically united dioceses and churches, is an administrative procedure which is required only in the situation of clerical transfer between dioceses and churches sharing reciprocal canonical unity. The canons, such as those discussing letters of release, which describe normal relations between churches sharing reciprocal canonical unity, do not hold for relations between churches divided by schism, something which Rocker itself recognizes, see paragraph 22, above. Therefore, by rupturing the canonical unity of the Rocker diocese and the MP Archdiocese through his Directive 359/E of January 23, 2021, see paragraphs 8 to 9. Above, BP Ironii Steenberg thereby removed from the MP Archdiocese any obligation to relate to the Rocker diocese in the manner which the Holy Canons require of those dioceses and churches which share reciprocal canonical unity. As such, BP Ironii, by initiating a schism of the Rocker diocese from the MP Archdiocese, thereby removed from the MP Archdiocese any canonical requirement to receive letters of release from BP Ironii for clergy transferring from the Rocker diocese to the MP Archdiocese. And because there was, as such, no canonical requirement for the MP Archdiocese to receive clergy from the Rocker diocese only with letters of release, the canonical nature of the transfer of the clergy from the Rocker diocese to the MP Archdiocese was not in any way hindered by BP Ironii's choice not to provide such letters. 33. Consequently, there is no legitimacy in BP Ironii Steenberg's claim that the clergy could not transfer canonically from the Rocker diocese to the MP Archdiocese without the issuing of letters of release. Rather, by virtue of BP Ironii severing the Rocker Diocese's canonical unity with the MP Archdiocese, Metr John of Dubna, was canonically entirely justified in receiving clergy from the Rocker Diocese, Kappa Alpha Tau. Omicron Kappa Omicron Nu Omicron Mu Alpha Nu, without letters of release from BP Ironii. BP Ironii cannot institute a schism with another diocese or church and then legitimately require that diocese or church to act toward him as if they were still in a situation of full canonical unity, without any schism. 3. Further canonical and procedural violations by BP Ironii Steenberg. 34 Subsequent to the canonical transfer of the clergy from the Rocker Diocese to the MP Archdiocese, BP Ironii Steenberg initiated a course of recriminatory action against the clerics, by issuing them with charges of ecclesiastical criminality, to be judged at a session of BP Ironii diocesan court. The actions of BP Ironii and his diocesan court have been abusive, conducted in violation of the holy canons, Rocker's own procedures, and natural justice. As such, not only do they have no validity, but they constitute a further example of BP Ironii acting ultra vires, in opposition to the canonical order of the Church. BP Ironii Steenberg lacks jurisdiction over the accused clergy. 35 As diocesan bishop of the Rocker Diocese of Western Europe, BP Ironii Steenberg's canonical jurisdiction is limited to that diocese, and he has no canonical jurisdiction over clergy who are members of a different diocese, cf. paragraph 13.3. above. However, at the time when BP Ironii issued these charges of ecclesiastical criminality to the clergy, they had already transferred to the MP Archdiocese, and so were no longer within BP Ironii canonical jurisdiction. As such, BP Ironii no longer possessed any jurisdiction entitling him to charge them with ecclesiastical crimes and to have these charges judged at a session of his diocesan court. Rather, in so doing, BP Ironii once again acted ultra vires, violating the canonical limits of his jurisdiction, and assuming for himself the jurisdiction which canonically belongs to the ruling bishop of the MP Archdiocese. Because BP Ironii has no jurisdiction to charge the clergy, the charges he has issued are invalid, and because his diocesan court has no jurisdiction to judge the clergy, any judgments which it may make regarding these charges are null and void. 2. The accuser cannot be judge of his own case. 36 BP Ironii Steenberg's diocesan court has been organized in such a way that there is no clear distinction between judge and accuser. Thus, each of the notices of ecclesiastical charges received by the clergy begin with the following identically worded paragraph. By this letter, the diocesan ecclesiastical court informs you, name, a cleric of the Diocese of Great Britain and Western Europe of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia and under her sole canonical authority, of a canonical hearing to be held on Wednesday, 7/20 October 2021, at which the following charges against you will be examined, namely that you are hereby accused by the court of. Wherever follows the list of charges. The words "you are hereby accused by the court of" make explicit that the court assembled to judge the accusations being made against each cleric is also the accuser making these accusations. However, to conduct a trial in which the accuser is also the judge is a basic violation of natural justice, nemo judex in causa sua, and no trial in which the accuser is also the judge can ever reckoned be a fair trial. Therefore, because the diocesan court proceedings organized by BP Ironii against the clergy establish the accuser as the judge of the case, those court proceedings are illegitimate, and any judgments they may issue are null and void. 3. The accused must be informed of the time and place at which the court will sit. 37 BP Ironii Steenberg's diocesan court failed to inform the clergy being accused of precisely where and when his diocesan court would sit to try these accusations. Rather, the clergy were notified only of a date, but not of the location and time of day at which the diocesan court would sit to judge the accusations being made against them. However, it is a basic violation of natural justice for a court to try a case without informing the accused of where and when it will sit to try their case. No one can defend himself at a trial, if he does not know where and when it will occur. Moreover, BP Irani's diocesan court is here in direct violation of Regulation 53 of Rocker's governing document, the Regulations on the Ecclesiastical Court, according to which the time and place of the hearing must be announced to the parties, the accusers and the accused, and also the witnesses who will give information to the court, in advance, by special notice. No court which so basically violates natural justice, and no Rocker court which so directly violates Rocker's regulations on the ecclesiastical court, can be considered legitimate. Rather, the proceedings of BP Irani's diocesan court against the clergy are, on this basis too, evidently illegitimate, and any judgments they may issue are null and void. 4. The accused must receive clear statement of the charges being made against him. 38 BP Irani Steenberg's diocesan court failed to provide each of the clergy being accused of clear statements of the charges being made against them, in precisely formulated accusations. However, it is a basic violation of natural justice for a court to try a case without informing the accused of precisely what he is being accused of. No one can properly prepare a defense, if he does not know the precise nature and cause of the accusations being made against him. Moreover, BP Irani's diocesan court is here in direct violation of Regulation 54 of Rocker's Regulations on the Ecclesiastical Court. The accused or respondent must be charged via written notice in a timely manner by the diocesan legal authority on the basis of evidentiary material obtained, precisely describing the accusations to which he has the right in his defense to respond in written form before the court sits, and to respond orally during the hearing. However, no court which so basically violates natural justice, and no Rocker court which so directly violates Rocker's regulations on the ecclesiastical court, can be considered legitimate. Rather, the proceedings of BP Irani's diocesan court against the clergy are, on this basis too, evidently illegitimate, and any judgments they may issue are null and void. 39 By way of example to clarify the failure of BP Irani Steenberg's diocesan court to provide the clergy being accused with precisely formulated statements of the charges being made against them, one may consider indicatively the following charge, issued to a cleric of the rank of reader, quoted here in extenso. Charge 5, serving whilst under suspension. Namely, that reader name has committed the canonical crime of serving while himself under canonical suspension, and thus engaging in liturgical/administrative acts from which he has been prohibited, contrary to the instructions of the church authorities. Cf. Canon 4 of Antioch, Canon 13 of Sardica. The format of the charge is entirely typical of the charges received by clergy from BP Irani, a numbered charge in boldface, followed by a vague sentence, and then supplemented with an invitation to compare certain canons. Here, firstly, the lack of precision of this charge is evident from the failure to state precisely in which particular acts the reader is being accused of engaging. The charge does not name any single action, it does not say when or where the acts of which the reader is being accused are alleged to have taken place. The charge is vague even as regards whether the acts in question are liturgical, administrative, or both. Such lack of clarity prevents the accused from knowing precisely what it is he is being accused of having done, and hence makes it impossible for him to adequately defend himself. Secondly, the lack of precision of this charge is clear from the failure to cite which canon or governing regulation the accuser is being alleged to have violated. An invitation to compare certain canons is not a statement that the accused is being accused of having broken these canons. Moreover, that these canons are not the basis of the charge is evident from the fact that neither is relevant to the accused. Canon 4 of the Synod of Antioch concerns a bishop, presbyter, or deacon who, a for having been deposed, kappa alpha theta alpha iota rho epsilon theta epsilon, liturgizes in some way. However, the accused is neither a bishop, presbyter, nor a deacon. Neither has the accused been deposed. So this canon is irrelevant to the charge being made, and could never have been its real basis. Canon 13 of the Synod of Sardica concerns an excommunicated cleric, tau iota tau nu. Kappa lambda eta rho iota kappa nu kappa omicron iota nu nu tau eta omicron, who attempts to receive Holy Communion from the bishop of another diocese. However, the reader who was the recipient of this charge has not been excommunicated. So this canon is also irrelevant to the charge being made, and could never have been its real basis. In this situation, the suspicion is inevitably that these canons have been referenced to give a prima facie appearance of legitimacy to a charge whose real basis lies elsewhere, but which BP Irenaeus diocesan court does not wish to commit to paper. That said, the basic situation is clear: the reader being accused has not really been told what he is accused of having done, and has not really been told what canon or regulation he is being accused of having violated. 40 overall, by organizing his diocesan court to hear cases over which it has no jurisdiction, by setting up his diocesan court in a manner which identifies the accuser as the judge, by failing to tell the accused when and where the court will sit, and by failing to tell the accused precisely what they are being accused of, BP Irenaeus' actions have amounted to a profound violation of canonical order, rocker regulations, and natural justice. Not only does such violation render the proceedings of his diocesan court illegitimately, but it gives the appearance of an abuse of power, in which BP Irenaeus is using the diocesan court to conduct a show trial. 4. Suggestions to move forward. 41. The situation of schism and recrimination within which BP Irenaeus Steenberg has placed the rocker diocese in the British Isles is deeply damaging to the Russian Orthodox Church. For both the sake of rocker and for the sake of the Russian Orthodoxy more widely, this schism needs to be healed. The healing of this schism requires an end to the actual schism itself, 2. A reconciliation over the issues which formed the proximate causes of the schism, and 3. Further discussion and dialogue concerning the underlying issues that led to the schism. With respect to these goals, the following two groups of suggestions are here offered. What is needed to end the schism itself. 42. With respect to the schism itself, it must be recognized that neither the MP Archdiocese nor the Diocese of Sauros has severed communion or canonical unity with rocker, and that it is only rocker which has instituted the schism. Therefore, the responsibility to end the schism of the rocker diocese falls principally upon rocker itself. Here, two primary actions are necessary. Firstly, and most basically, rocker needs to rescind BP Irenaeus Steenberg's Directive 359/E of January 23, 2021, which prohibited the ecclesiastical participation, liturgical participation, and concelebration of rocker in the British Isles with the MP Archdiocese. Without this action, the schism cannot end, and this is an action which only rocker can perform. If, as seems clear, BP Irenaeus is unwilling to do this himself, then rocker's Synod of Bishops needs to take the matter in hand. Secondly, and in addition, rocker should to disavow the non-canonical actions of BP Irenaeus performed during the period of the schism. Specifically, Rocker should to dissociate itself from the claims of BP Ironi's Notice 390/E of February 26, 2021, clarifying both that it recognizes the priesthood of Fr. Jacob Sie Mens, and that it disavows any accusation of Metr John of Dubna as being somehow guilty of spiritual deception. Rocker should recognize that, due to the schism initiated by BP Ironi, there did not exist regular canonical unity between the Rocker Diocese and the MP Archdiocese during August 2021, so that, as a consequence, the transfer of clergy from Rocker to the MP Archdiocese during that month did not require the transmission of letters of release, but rather is entirely canonical, Kappa Alpha Tau Omicron Kappa Omicron Nu Omicron Mu Alpha Nu. Rocker should declare null and void all recriminatory actions undertaken by BP Ironi against the clergy who transferred to the MP Archdiocese to escape his schism. 2. What is needed for reconciliation over the proximate issues which led to the schism. 43. With respect to the proximate issues which led to the schism of the Rocker Diocese from the MP Archdiocese, here again the principal responsibility lies with Rocker. This schism arose through BP Ironi's rejection of the Russian Orthodox practice of receiving Catholic priests into the Orthodox Church by vesting and concelebration, a practice attested by multiple canonized Russian Orthodox saints. Here, Rocker needs to clarify that, as a church, it recognizes the legitimacy of this Russian Orthodox practice, and that as such it recognizes the reality that a Catholic priest received by vesting and concelebration is thereby constituted as an Orthodox priest. This, of course, does not mean that there is no room for continuing disagreements or differences in estimation regarding, for example, what is to be considered as best practice, or indeed as normal practice, in the reception of Catholic priests into the Orthodox Church. What it does require is a recognition that an Orthodox priest who has been thus received is not a non-priest, lacking the grace of ordination. 3. The need for deeper discussion. 44. With respect to further discussion and dialogue concerning the underlying issues that led to this schism, matters are more complicated. 45. There is a need for frank discussion and dialogue regarding Rocker's continuing commitment to the 2007 Act of Canonical Communion. Schism should be an absolute last resort, not something into which a bishop jumps in a period of just over 4 weeks. But the speed, if not eagerness, with which BP Ironi Steenberg, as a Rocker bishop, instituted a schism with an archdiocese of the Moscow Patriarchate, and thereby jeopardized the unity of the Russian Orthodox Church more broadly, suggests that such a course of action enjoys broader support within Rocker. And the act of canonical communion will not remain viable if Rocker bishops are so quick to jump into schism whenever a diocese of the Moscow Patriarchate does not fall into line with their criticisms. As such, the events of BP Ironi's schism call forth a need for Rocker to make clear its continued commitment to the act of canonical communion, and hence its commitment to sacramental communion and canonical unity with the larger Russian Orthodox Church, whose internal practices and theology is not always the same as that of Rocker. 46. There is also clearly a need for serious discussion and dialogue between Rocker and the Moscow Patriarchate, including the MP Archdiocese, regarding the question of the reception of heterodox, a question on which Rocker, particularly in North America, has come to differ greatly from the Moscow Patriarchate. But such a dialogue cannot be simply a one-way criticism, in which primarily North American Rocker participants survey the history of the Moscow Patriarchate's practice, making criticisms on points where such practice differs from their own. Rather, what is especially needed at this point is to consider how Rocker's sacramental theology and practice has come to diverge so greatly from the Moscow Patriarchate's practice that a Rocker bishop could lead his diocese into schism from an archdiocese of the Moscow Patriarchate, ostensibly to protect his diocese from the standard practice of the Russian Orthodox Church itself. Here, in particular, there is need for a serious consideration of the transformation of North American rockers' sacramental theology since approximately the late 1960s, particularly under the influence of Greek Old Calendarist thought. A discussion on the question of reception with reference to rocker can only be fruitful if there is an understanding of how Greek Old Calendarists were able to lead substantial elements of rocker to reject the settled sacramental traditions of the Russian Orthodox Church, the very church whose traditions rocker was established to preserve, in favor of extreme positions of modern Greek origin which diverge so greatly from Russian Orthodox tradition. It is to be hoped that, through such a consideration, in which not only do rocker participants offer criticisms the Moscow Patriarchate's historical particularities, but in which the Moscow Patriarchate's participants criticize these historical transformations. In rocker, a new clarity would be achieved, across the Russian Orthodox Church, of the need to hold fast to the standard Russian Orthodox practices regarding reception, as these are expressed not only in the liturgical books of the Moscow Patriarchate, but above all in the living witness of Russian Orthodox saints such as Saint Tikhon of Moscow and Saint Alexis of Wilkes-Barre. Feast of Saint Michael, First Metropolitan of Kiev. September 30th/October 13th, 2021.